Meridian Station hung in orbit above Thessa Prime like a jewel someone had polished too enthusiastically, all gleaming surfaces and architectural ambition. Rook Halstead ignored the aesthetic and focused on the grinding noise coming from Carbon Scrubber Array 7, which sounded like mechanical murder and couldn't be healthy for anyone breathing the processed air. He'd been on station for 4 days, contracted to repair environmental systems that previous technicians had declared functional within acceptable parameters. Rook had learned early in his career that acceptable parameters usually meant barely working and probably going to catastrophically fail soon. The station was buzzing with nervous energy. Treaty negotiations between humanity and the Thessian Empire were wrapping up, and apparently the Thessian Queen Matriarch herself was arriving for the signing ceremony. Rook had seen the preparations, extra security, obsessive cleaning, someone arguing loudly about flower arrangements that cost more than Rook's annual income. He stayed in the maintenance tunnels where he belonged. Contractor Halstead. A voice crackled through his comm. Station Director Voss requests your presence at the reception hall for the royal welcome ceremony. All essential personnel are required to attend. Rook paused mid-diagnostic. I'm fixing the thing that makes air breathable. That feels pretty essential to me staying down here. Director's orders, 900 hours, formal dress encouraged. The comm clicked off before Rook could argue that his version of formal dress was coveralls without visible grease stains. He leaned back against the tunnel wall and closed his eyes. 6 months. That's how long it had been since Dust's Edge, since the storm, since the crashed pod. He'd done dozens of contracts since then, moved through stations and colonies like water through a filter, never staying long enough for anyone to ask about scars or stories. But now he was on Meridian, and the Thessian crown heir was arriving, and Rook's hands were shaking slightly as he packed up his tools, because he had a terrible feeling that the universe was about to make his life very complicated. He'd found her in a caustic dust storm that turned the air into liquid pain. Her escape pod was half buried, emergency beacon dark, life support making sounds that suggested impending failure. She'd been maybe 13, maybe younger, hard to tell with Thessians, with long ears that marked her species and terror in her dark eyes. Rook didn't think, just acted. Cracked the pod's seal, pulled her out, started walking toward his shelter 3 kilometers away. The storm ate through his suit's outer layer, burned his exposed skin. The girl was crying, gasping in the recycled air his emergency breather provided, so he sang to her. Stupid songs from musicals his sister had loved. Anything to keep her calm, keep her talking, keep her believing rescue was coming. 3 hours. That's how long it took before he saw the ships descending through the storm. Long enough for his suit's integrity to drop to critical levels. Long enough for the girl to tell him her name was Kaela, and she was scared, and she missed her mother. He'd set her down near the rescue team's approach, made sure they saw her, then walked away before anyone could ask for his name or his story. Standard procedure. Don't get involved. Do the job. Move on. Except now he was standing in a reception hall in his cleanest coveralls, which still bore faint stains he couldn't quite remove, surrounded by diplomats in formal attire who made him feel like a wrench in a jewelry box. The station director was giving a speech about cooperation and shared futures. Rook mentally calculated how many carbon scrubbers he could repair in the time this ceremony was wasting. Then the doors opened, and the Thessian delegation entered. Guards first, in ceremonial armor that probably cost more than Rook's ship. Advisors next, carrying tablets and wearing the carefully neutral expressions of people paid to manage complications. And then Queen Matriarch Yivelle, tall and elegant, her long ears adorned with jeweled cuffs, her presence commanding the room without effort. Beside her walked a girl in formal robes that seemed slightly too large, moving with practiced precision that couldn't quite hide her youth. Crown Heir Kaela. Rook's heart kicked against his ribs. He was standing near the back near the maintenance access. He could leave, right now, Just slip away before. Kayla's eyes swept the room and locked onto him. She stopped walking. Completely froze mid-step, her formal composure shattering. Her breath caught audible in the suddenly quiet hall. "Mom!" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried. "It's him." Every head turned. First to Kaela, then following her gaze to where Rook stood frozen like a particularly stupid deer in headlights. Queen Yivelle's expression shifted from diplomatic pleasantness to sharp, focused attention. She looked at her daughter, then at Rook, and understanding began to dawn in her dark eyes. Rook wanted to disappear into the floor. Instead, he stood there while the most powerful woman in 3-star systems began walking toward him with the steady certainty of someone who'd just found something she'd been searching for. The reception hall erupted into controlled chaos. Guards moving to positions, advisors whispering urgently, the station director looking like someone had just rewritten the ceremony script in a language he didn't speak. Queen Yivelle raised one hand, and silence fell like a blade. She walked toward Rook, not rushing, but with purpose, and her guards followed at a distance that suggested they weren't sure if this was a security situation or something else entirely. Rook calculated his escape route. The maintenance access was right behind him. He could vanish into the station's infrastructure, finish his contract remotely, be gone before. But Kaela was still staring at him with eyes that remembered terror and pain and a stranger who stayed. And Rook found he couldn't move. The Queen stopped 3 feet away, studying him with an intensity that felt like being read at the atomic level. "You," she said, voice carefully neutral. "You are the environmental contractor, Rook Halstead." It wasn't a question, but Rook nodded anyway. "Yes, ma'am, Your Majesty. I'm just here to fix the carbon scrubbers. I didn't mean to." He carried me. Kaela stepped forward despite the advisor trying to gently restrain her. Through the storm, his suit was burning, mine was failing, he didn't leave. Her voice cracked. He stayed until he saw the ships, then he was just gone. The Queen's expression didn't change, but something happened around her eyes, a depth of emotion held carefully in check. "We looked for you, after the rescue. My daughter could only describe you, human, male, scarred hands, kind voice. No name, no identification. The colony had no record of a contractor matching that description." "I completed my contract and moved on," Rook said, which was technically true and completely inadequate. "Standard procedure. Standard procedure." The Queen repeated the words like she was testing their weight. "Is it standard procedure to risk your life for a child you don't know? To carry her through conditions that melted your equipment? To ask for nothing in return?" Rook shifted uncomfortably. Every eye in the hall was on him. She was scared. Someone needed to help. That was enough. Was it? The Queen's tone wasn't accusatory, just genuinely curious. Because most beings require more motivation than someone was scared. They require incentive, reward, recognition. "I'm not most beings, I guess." "No," the Queen agreed quietly. "You are not." Kaela moved closer, and Rook could see she was taller now than 6 months ago, growing into the formal robes that marked her status. "You sang," she said. "Human songs I didn't know. You said they were from something called musicals and they were silly, but they helped you not think about scary things." Rook's throat tightened. He barely remembered making that choice, just remembered trying to keep her calm, keep her talking, keep her believing help was coming. "You remembered that." "I remember everything." Kayla's voice was soft but firm. "I remember you said your suit would hold even though I could see it burning. I remember you said rescue was definitely coming even though you sounded worried. I remember you stayed when you could have saved yourself." 3 ships passed before you," an advisor added, his tone formal but his expression showing something like respect. "The Heir's pod registered them on sensors. They saw her beacon. They didn't stop." The words hit Rook like a physical blow. 3 ships. He'd assumed rescue was imminent, that someone would stop. He'd had no idea she'd been out there for hours, watching help pass her by. "The storm was rated lethal," another advisor continued. 17 humans and 4 Thessians died in that event. The logical action was to wait for it to pass. You chose otherwise. She was a kid, Rook said, frustration creeping in. She was terrified and alone. I'm not taking a medal for basic human decency. Then don't take it for decency, Queen Yivelle said, and her voice had dropped its formal register. Take it because for 6 months I have wondered about the stranger who saved my child, who asked nothing, who vanished before I could even learn his name. She reached up and removed a jeweled cuff from her right ear, a deliberate, significant gesture that made her entire delegation inhale sharply. Among my people, there is no higher honor than this. It is given to those who have preserved the royal line, who have given us back what we cannot replace. She held it out. Rook looked at the jeweled cuff in the queen's outstretched hand. It caught the light, scattering colors across the polished floor, beautiful, expensive, and representing a level of recognition that made his skin crawl with discomfort. Your Majesty, he said carefully, I fix things. Environmental systems, life support, anything that keeps people breathing. That's what I'm good at. I'm not good at. He gestured vaguely at the formal hall, the watching dignitaries, the weight of attention, this. You're good at seeing someone who needs help and providing it, the Queen corrected. That seems like a valuable skill. It's not a skill, it's just, Rook struggled for words. It's just what you do. You see someone scared and alone, you help them. That's not heroic. That's just being a decent person. The 17 humans and 4 Thessians who died in that storm probably also considered themselves decent people, the Queen said quietly. Yet they sheltered in place, as was logical and safe and recommended by every emergency protocol. You made a different calculation. I didn't calculate anything, I just moved. Exactly, the Queen's expression softened slightly. You acted without weighing personal cost against potential gain. In my experience, that kind of integrity is rare enough to be precious. Kaela stepped even closer, close enough that Rook could see the formal makeup couldn't quite hide the youth in her face. When you carried me, she said, you told me about your sister, how she loved musicals and made you watch them even though you thought they were silly. You said she always believed in happy endings even when things looked bad. Rook's chest tightened. He'd forgotten that conversation, forgotten spilling personal history to keep a terrified child distracted. Yeah, she was like that. Died 7 years ago. Medical transport accident. The words came out flat, practiced. She was an emergency medic, loved helping people. Understanding flickered across the Queen's face. I see. Do you? Rook met her eyes. Because I didn't save your daughter to be some kind of hero. I saved her because leaving her felt like leaving my sister, and I already did that once. I already failed to protect someone who mattered. I wasn't going to. He cut himself off, aware he was saying too much, revealing too much. The hall was silent. Even the advisors had stopped their urgent whispering. I'm sorry for your loss, Queen Yivelle said, and the sympathy in her voice was genuine enough to hurt. But Kaela is not your sister. Saving her doesn't undo what happened. You understand that, yes? I understand that I did what needed doing, and I don't need recognition for it. Rook's voice came out harder than he intended. I especially don't need to be paraded around as some example of human virtue, or whatever political narrative this is building toward. It's not political, Kaela said, and there was steel in her young voice. It's personal. You saved my life. You stayed when you could have left. You sang silly songs until I stopped being scared. And then you disappeared before I could even say thank you. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Do you know how that feels? To owe someone your life and not even know their name. Rook's anger deflated like a punctured tire. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. Too late. They stared at each other, the contractor and the crown heir, while the weight of 6 months of unanswered questions hung between them. Finally, Rook sighed. Okay, fine, I'm Rook Halstead. I'm 40 years old. I fix broken things for a living. I'm bad at accepting compliments and worse at formal events. And 6 months ago, I did something that felt obvious at the time, but apparently wasn't. It wasn't obvious to 3 other ships, Queen Yivelle reminded him gently. She still held out the cuff. Please, let me give you this, not as payment, not as political theater, as a mother thanking the person who gave her back her child. Rook looked at Kaela, at the girl who'd been small and terrified, now standing tall in formal robes with her mother's strength showing through. He took the cuff. It was warm from the Queen's ear, surprisingly light and probably worth more than everything Rook owned combined. Thank you, Queen Yivelle said, and the relief in her voice was palpable. For my daughter, for staying. For being the kind of person who doesn't calculate cost before offering help. People are going to make a big deal out of this, Rook warned. Yes. I hate big deals. I suspect you do. The Queen smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her formal features. But you'll endure it anyway, because enduring difficult things seems to be something you're good at. Kaela grinned suddenly. Can I hug him? Is that diplomatically acceptable? Before anyone could answer, she'd wrapped her arms around Rook in a hug that violated probably 17 protocols, and made several guards reach for weapons they didn't draw. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. For the songs, for staying, for carrying me home. Rook awkwardly patted her back, painfully aware of the Queen watching with an expression caught between amusement and deep emotion. You're welcome, kid. Try not to crash any more pods, yeah. I'll do my best. When Kaela stepped back, she was grinning through tears, and the Queen gently guided her back toward the formal delegation. But before she turned away, Yivelle met Rook's eyes one more time. The galaxy measures worth in power and territory and treaties, she said quietly. But sometimes history changes because one ordinary person refuses to leave someone behind. Remember that, Rook Halstead. You've already changed mine. The ceremony continued after that, speeches and formal declarations that Rook barely registered. He stood at the back of the hall, turning the jeweled cuff over in his scarred hands, still not entirely sure what had just happened. Kaela kept glancing back at him throughout the proceedings, grinning whenever their eyes met. The Queen maintained her formal composure, but there was a lightness to her now that hadn't been there before, like a weight she'd been carrying had finally been set down. When the ceremony finally ended and the crowds began to disperse, Rook tried to slip away. He made it exactly 3 steps before Kaela intercepted him. You're not actually going to disappear again, are you? She asked, and despite the formal robes and the royal bearing, she sounded like what she was. A teenager who'd found someone important and was terrified of losing them again. I have carbon scrubbers to fix, Rook said, which was true but also evasive. After that I have 17 other contracts lined up across 4 systems. But you'll come back. There was vulnerability in the question that made Rook's chest ache. Why would I come back? Because, Kaela hesitated, glancing back at where her mother was deep in conversation with human diplomats. Because I'd like to know you. Not as the stranger who saved me. As a person. Someone who understands what it's like when everyone treats you like you're made of glass because something bad almost happened. Rook understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. Your mother might not approve of you hanging around with random contractors. My mother just gave you one of the highest honors in Thessian culture. I think she approves. Fair point. I'm not good at staying in touch, Rook warned. I move around a lot. I'm bad at communication. I'm basically a terrible friend. So we'll start with terrible and work our way up to mediocre. Kaela's grin was infectious. Besides, you already taught me all the words to Seasons of Love. We're practically bonded for life. Despite everything, Rook laughed. That's the worst song to get stuck in your head. 525,600 minutes. Don't. How do you measure a year in the life? I'm leaving. But he was smiling and Kaela knew it. She pulled out a small data chip. My personal comm code, not the official royal one, my actual code. For when you want to complain about broken environmental systems, or share terrible musical recommendations. Rook took the chip carefully. I really am bad at staying in touch. Then I'll be annoying and message you first. Kayla's expression turned serious. Thank you, again, for everything, for seeing me as a scared kid instead of a political asset, for staying, for remembering I was worth saving. You were always worth saving, Rook said quietly. Title or no title, that was never the question. Kayla hugged him again, quicker this time, more casual, like they were actually friends rather than stranger and royalty. Then she was gone, swept back into the formal delegation, leaving Rook standing alone with a jeweled cuff in his pocket and a data chip in his hand. He made it back to the maintenance tunnels before anyone else could intercept him. The carbon scrubbers were still grinding ominously, oblivious to the fact that Rook's entire day had gone sideways in ways he couldn't have predicted. He sat in the quiet darkness, holding the cuff up to the dim work lights. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost alien, which he supposed it was. A piece of another culture's highest honor, given to a human who'd just been doing what felt right. His comm chimed, a message from an unknown sender. Thank you for returning what I thought was lost. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you have a friend in the Thessian Empire. Yivelle. Rook stared at the message for a long time. A friend in the Thessian Empire. The most powerful woman in 3-star systems offering friendship to a contractor who fixed broken air filters. He thought about his sister, about the medical transport accident, about 7 years of moving from contract to contract, because staying still meant remembering what he'd lost. He thought about Kayla's voice in a failing pod, terrified and young, asking if rescue was really coming. He thought about 3 ships that passed by because the logical thing was to wait out the storm. And he thought about how sometimes the most important thing you can do is stay when every logical calculation says you should leave. The carbon scrubbers still needed fixing. There was work to do. But for the first time in 7 years, Rook felt like maybe, just maybe, he'd done something that mattered in a way that went beyond keeping systems functional. He'd helped someone who needed it, and she remembered. His comm chimed again. This time it was Kaela, 525,600 minutes. Rook groaned and typed back, I'm blocking this number. Her response was immediate, no you're not. She was right, he wasn't. Outside the maintenance tunnel, the station continued its careful dance of diplomacy and politics. Treaties were